first thing I remember is the smell. Antiseptic and something floral, fake lavender from an air freshener someone had plugged into the wall. My eyes wouldn't open all the way, just slits. Enough to see the blurry white of a ceiling and the pale yellow curtain drawn around my bed. My mouth tasted like copper and old pennies. I tried to move my right hand and felt an IV line taped to the back of my wrist. The beeping beside me was steady, slow. I was alive. I hadn't been sure about that for a second. Then I heard my mother's voice. Sweetheart. Very soft. Very close. Her hand found mine before I could even turn my head. Don't talk yet. Just listen to me. I looked at her. She had been crying. Her mascara had settled into the creases under her eyes, and she hadn't bothered to wipe it away. My mother always wiped it away. She kept a travel pack of makeup remover wipes in every purse she owned. Something was wrong. There are people coming, she whispered. Her face was inches from mine. His parents. They're in the waiting room right now. The nurse just went to get them. She squeezed my hand, hard, the way she used to when I was little and afraid at the dentist. I need you to pretend you're still unconscious. Can you do that? Close your eyes and don't react to anything, whatever they say. Please. I stared at her. Mom. Please, Isla. I had never heard that tone from her before. Not when my dad left. Not at the funeral for my grandmother. Not once in 31 years. It was the tone of someone who already knew something terrible and was trying to keep it from splitting her open in a hospital corridor. I closed my eyes. I heard the curtain ring scrape across the rod. I felt the air in the room shift the way it does when more people walk in. I slowed my breathing the way I used to when I'd fake sleep as a kid to avoid conversations I didn't want to have. Long. Slow. Chest barely rising. She's still under. That was my mother's voice. Controlled now. The crying version was gone. What did the doctor say? A woman's voice I recognized. My mother-in-law, Patricia. No, I stopped myself. I'd always called her by her first name, the way she'd insisted from the beginning. We're family, none of this Mrs. Business. Her voice had a careful quality to it, the kind of careful that isn't kindness, the kind that's strategy. Concussion, some bruising on her ribs, they want to keep her overnight for observation. A pause. Then my father-in-law and the car. Totaled, my mother said. Another pause, longer. I kept my breathing slow, in through the nose, out. I had gotten very good at being still. Well? My father-in-law's voice dropped. Not a whisper, more like a man who had simply forgotten there was someone else in the room, or didn't care. This changes things. It complicates things, my mother-in-law said. Connor needs to know the timeline has to move. Connor knows. My chest didn't move. I was a stone. Connor, my husband. We had been married 14 months. She's a physical therapist, my mother-in-law said. She works with patients all day. She's on her feet. If there's any lasting issue with the concussion, if she can't go back to work, then the clause applies, my father-in-law said. Yes. I didn't know what clause. I didn't know what they were talking about. I was about to find out it was everything. I had met Connor Aldridge at a friend's birthday party 3 years earlier. He was tall, easy to talk to, the kind of man who remembered what drink you'd ordered and brought you a refill without being asked. He'd texted me the next morning. We went on 4 dates in 2 weeks. By month 3, I was leaving a toothbrush at his apartment. His parents were a different category of wealthy than anything I'd grown up around. My family was comfortable. My mother had been an office manager for 20 years. My father had been an electrician before he left. We didn't struggle. But the Aldridges had a different relationship with money, the kind where it was never discussed because it was never a question. They had a family attorney. They had a family financial planner. They had a standing reservation at a restaurant downtown that didn't take reservations. When Connor and I got engaged, his mother sat me down for what she called a family conversation and presented me with a prenuptial agreement. I was not a lawyer. I was a physical therapist who had graduated with student loan debt and a genuine love for helping people move without pain after injury. I read the prenup the way a non-lawyer reads a prenup, skimming, looking for the big scary parts, finding none, and assuming the rest was standard. Connor sat beside me and said, "It's just to protect both of us, babe. Totally normal." I signed it. I didn't have it reviewed. I didn't ask my own attorney because I didn't have an attorney. I was 30 years old and in love, and I trusted the man sitting next to me. That was the first mistake. There were others. I lay in that hospital bed for 40 minutes while my mother-in-law talked about timelines and clauses and Connor's next steps. I learned, through the medium of pretending to be unconscious, that my husband had been seeing someone else for at least 8 months, that his parents approved of this other person, a woman named something I didn't catch. The name slipped past me and had been, in their words, facilitating the transition. That the prenuptial agreement had a clause 11, my father-in-law said it like he'd memorized the number, about what happened if I became unable to continue my career. Something about financial contribution and asset recapture. I didn't fully understand it in the moment. I would understand it very well later. That the accident, my car accident, the one I'd woken up from in this hospital, had happened on a road I didn't normally take. I had only taken it that day because Connor had texted me that morning and asked me to stop at a specialty grocery store on my way home. The store was in a direction I never drove. I had been going out of my way for him, the way I had been going out of my way for him for 14 months. The police had called it a weather-related incident. Black ice. February in Ohio. I lay there with my eyes closed and I thought about the fact that I had gone out of my way. My father-in-law said, before they left, "Let's give it a few days. See how she comes out of this. If there's any cognitive issue, any physical limitation, the clause is airtight." Gerald reviewed it himself. Gerald, their family attorney. My mother-in-law said, "And if she's fine?" A pause. "Then Connor will have a different conversation with her." They left. I heard the curtain rings again. Heard their footsteps move down the corridor. My mother let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for a very long time. Her hand was still around mine. I opened my eyes. Neither of us said anything for almost a minute. Then I said, "I need you to find me a lawyer." Her name was Adaisy, and she was the sharpest person I had spoken to in my life. She was a friend of my cousin's, a family law attorney based in Columbus, who had spent 11 years working on exactly the kind of cases I was now, apparently, living in. She came to my mother's house 4 days after I was discharged, sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a coffee she didn't touch, and listened to me talk for 2 hours without interrupting once. When I finished, she looked at her notes. "The clause your father-in-law referenced," she said. "You don't have a copy of the prenup?" I did. I had kept a copy in a folder in the bottom drawer of my home office. My home office, which was in the house I shared with my husband. "I need that document," she said. I still had a key. Connor was at work. He worked in commercial real estate, long hours, client meetings, unpredictable schedule. I had 40 minutes at the house on a Tuesday morning while my mother sat in the car at the end of the driveway watching for his car like a lookout. I went inside, went to my office, and opened the bottom drawer. The folder was there. I took it. I also, because something made me look, opened the filing cabinet in the corner. It was locked. It had always been locked. Connor kept financial documents in there, and I had never had a reason to ask for the key. I had never thought to ask. That morning, for reasons I couldn't fully explain to myself, I looked at the lock and thought about the fact that I had never thought to ask. I left the filing cabinet and took the folder. Adaisy read the prenup in 11 minutes. I watched her face. "Clause 11, she said. "What does it say?" She turned the document around and pointed. I read it. Then I read it again. The clause stated that if, at any point during the marriage, I ceased to be employed in a professional capacity for a period exceeding 90 days, my claim to any jointly held assets, including the house we had purchased together 18 months ago, would be subject to full review and potential recapture by the Aldridge Family Trust. I had gone on a ski trip with Connor the previous winter and sprained my ankle badly enough that I'd missed 6 weeks of work. I had a second ski trip planned for March. If I had taken it, if I had been injured again or simply been unlucky, 90 days was not a long way away. Is this enforceable? I asked. Adazy tilted her head in a way that meant it's complicated. It's aggressive. Whether it holds up depends on several factors. What I want to know right now is whether this agreement was properly executed. Walk me through the signing. I walked her through it. She wrote something on her legal pad and underlined it twice. Did anyone witness your signing other than Connor? His parents were in the room, and Gerald, their attorney. Their attorney witnessed your signature? Yes. She put her pen down. Isa, she said, you should have had independent counsel review this before you signed. You know that now. But what I'm looking at here is a situation where the opposing party's own attorney served as the sole witness to your signature. That is a significant problem for them, not for you. I went home to the house once more the following week when Connor called me to say he thought we should talk in person. He was standing in the kitchen when I arrived. He looked tired. He had the particular look of a man who has been rehearsing a conversation and is not entirely confident in his lines. I think we both know this isn't working, he said. I looked at him. I had known this man for 3 years. I had believed I knew him. I want us to be respectful about this, he said. My family's attorney has drawn up. I have my own attorney, I said. He blinked. I signed nothing without independent counsel, I continued, and I won't be signing anything without her present. If you'd like to schedule a 4-way meeting, you can have Gerald contact Daisy directly. She's already familiar with the prenuptial agreement, both the text of it and the circumstances under which it was signed. The color that left his face in that moment. I won't say I was glad. I was not glad about any of it. I had loved this person. I had changed my life for this person, but watching him understand that I was not the version of me he had prepared for, the confused, concussed, working-class girl with no legal resources and no idea what Clause 11 meant, something in my chest settled into place. A structural thing, like a bone going back where it belonged. I left the house. The next 4 months were the hardest I had ever lived through, and also, in a way I couldn't have predicted, the most clarifying. Adayas filed on my behalf for divorce. She also filed a motion challenging the validity of the prenuptial agreement on 2 grounds. First, that I had not had independent counsel at the time of signing. Second, that the opposing party's attorney had served as witness, creating a conflict of interest that undermined the document's integrity. The Aldridge family attorney, Gerald, pushed back hard. He was expensive and inexperienced, and he sent letters in the kind of formal, dense legal language that was clearly intended to intimidate. Daisy read each one, made notes, and responded. She did not seem intimidated. During discovery, we requested financial records. What came back was not what Connor had told me about our finances during the marriage. There were accounts I hadn't known existed. There were transfers to his personal account from a joint account, in amounts small enough to avoid triggering any immediate alarm but consistent enough, over 14 months to add up to something significant. Financial dissipation, Adazy said, when she laid it out for me at the kitchen table. He was moving money out of the marital estate. This is actually helpful for us. How much? I asked. She told me. I sat with that number for a while. I thought about the ski trip, the ankle, the 90 days. I thought about a Tuesday morning in February on a road I never drove because my husband had texted me and asked me to go out of my way. I thought about the smell of fake lavender and copper pennies and my mother's hand squeezing mine in a hospital room while I lay still and listened to my future being discussed over my unconscious body. I had never been a particularly vengeful person. I didn't enjoy conflict. I had spent my career helping people rebuild mobility they had lost, teaching them how to trust their own bodies again after injury. That was what I loved about physical therapy. The slow work, the incremental progress, the moment a patient walked without the limp they'd come in with. But I understood, sitting at my mother's kitchen table with a legal pad full of account transfers, that I was going to have to fight for myself the way I had always fought for my patients, methodically, patiently, with full information. The mediation session happened on a Thursday morning in April. Connor came with Gerald. I came with a Daisy. We sat on opposite sides of a table in a beige conference room with bad lighting and a water pitcher nobody touched. Gerald opened by presenting what he called a fair settlement offer that would have left me with my car, now repaired, and a small cash payment that did not come close to representing my share of the marital home we had purchased together. Odyssey let him finish. Then she opened her folder. She laid out, item by item, the financial dissipation. She laid out the conflict of interest in the prenup signing. She laid out the fact that I had returned to work full-time within 3 weeks of my discharge. No cognitive impairment, no physical limitation, which rendered Clause 11 moot regardless of its enforceability. Then she laid out one more thing. During discovery, my mother's phone records had been subpoenaed as a routine matter. In reviewing them, something had surfaced, a text exchange between my mother and a woman who turned out to be a former neighbor, who had seen Connor's car parked outside another address on 4 separate occasions during times he had told me he was traveling for work. Odyssey had corroborating documentation, dates, locations. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. "We're prepared to go to litigation," Ade said. "If you prefer to avoid that, I'd suggest a revised conversation about the asset division." Gerald looked at Connor. Connor looked at the table. We did not go to litigation. The settlement took 6 weeks to finalize. I received my share of the equity in the marital home. I received a portion of the funds that had been moved from our joint accounts. Connor retained his family trust, his family name, and whatever relationship he had with the woman I never met and didn't need to. I signed the divorce papers on a Wednesday afternoon in June. My mother drove me home after. We sat in her driveway for a few minutes without getting out of the car. The sky was that particular early summer color, deep blue at the top, pale at the horizon, the kind of evening that made everything look cleaner than it was. "You okay?" she said. "I don't know yet," I said. "Ask me in a year." She nodded. That was the right answer, and she knew it. I went back to work the Monday after the papers were signed. My patients were where I had left them, working through the same incremental progress, the same small victories. A woman recovering from hip replacement who had made it down the hallway without her walker for the first time. A teenage athlete rebuilding his shoulder after a labrum repair. An elderly man learning to trust his left leg again after a stroke. I did my job. I went home. I started slowly putting the pieces of a different life together. A smaller apartment I liked more than I'd expected to, a savings account in my name only, a budget I controlled entirely. Ade sent me a referral 3 months later. A woman in her late 20s who had been presented with a prenuptial agreement by her fiancé's family and didn't know where to start. Ade thought she might want to hear from someone who had been on the other side of it, someone who had signed one without fully understanding it and had found a way through. I called her. We talked for an hour. I told her, read every word. Get your own attorney. Someone who has never met your fiancé. Someone whose only job is to protect you. If anyone in the room has a relationship with the other party, they cannot be your witness. Take your time. Don't let anyone rush you. Love is real, and it is also not a substitute for information. She asked me if I thought she should sign it. I told her that wasn't something I could decide for her, but I told her that whatever she decided, she deserved to make that decision with full knowledge of what she was agreeing to. She thanked me. I don't know what she chose. I hope she went in with her eyes open. I hope, whatever happened, she was never in a position to learn the things I learned the hard way. In a hospital bed in February, with antiseptic in the air and a stranger's lavender covering up the smell of something sterile. Listening to the people who were supposed to be my family talk about me like I wasn't in the room. I was in the room. I heard everything. And when the time came, I made sure every word of it counted. I think about the fake lavender smell sometimes. It's strange, the things that stick. Not the lawyer's office, not the mediation table, Not even the moment Connor's face went pale when I told him I had my own attorney. What I remember most clearly is that air freshener plugged into the hospital wall and my mother's hand squeezing mine so hard it almost hurt, and the decision I made in the space between one slow breath and the next. To be still, to listen, to know. I didn't plan any of what came after that day. I didn't walk out of that hospital with a strategy. I walked out with a concussion and a folder of documents I barely understood and a name my cousin had given me. That was it. That was everything I had. But here's what I've come to understand about the choices I made in those months. None of them worked because I was lucky. They worked because I was willing to do the unglamorous thing over and over, sit at a kitchen table and read documents I didn't want to read, ask questions that made me feel naive for not already knowing the answers, build a case one slow piece at a time while pretending, in the parts of my life that still overlapped with his, that everything was fine. There's a version of this story where I confront Connor in the hospital room, where I let my anger do the talking, where I blow the whole thing open before I have a single piece of leverage. I think about that version a lot. It would have felt better for about 45 seconds. And then it would have cost me everything. The house, the settlement, the financial records we eventually pulled that showed exactly what had been moved and when. Doing the right thing is not always the satisfying thing. I had to learn it the hard way, lying still in a hospital bed while someone discussed my future over my body. What kept me going, and I mean this plainly, not as any kind of philosophy, was that I refused to let shame be louder than clarity. Because shame was there. The shame of having signed a document I didn't read. The shame of having trusted so completely. The shame of being 31 years old and not having my own attorney, not having my own accounts, not having built the kind of independent foundation that would have made me harder to corner. That shame wanted me to be quiet, to accept whatever they offered and disappear. I didn't let it win. Not because I'm particularly brave, but because Adizay sat across from me at my mother's kitchen table and showed me, item by item, that I had been wronged and that I had options. Knowledge does that. It converts shame into something you can actually use. I think about the woman I called months later, the one Adizi referred to me. She was scared and confused, and she just wanted someone to tell her it was going to be okay. I couldn't promise her that. What I could tell her was what I wished someone had told me, that the most powerful thing you can do for yourself is understand what you're agreeing to before you agree to it. That love and information are not in competition. That taking care of yourself is not a betrayal of the people you love. What happened to me was not fair, but what I did with it, the patience, the careful work, the refusal to act before I was ready, that was mine. That's the part no one can take back. I got my name back. I got my share back. I got my footing back. And I learned in the hardest possible way that the woman I was when I walked out of that hospital, quiet, listening, paying attention, was exactly who I needed to be.